Hello and welcome. Hope you are having a great day today. If this is one of your first times watching one of my videos, in these videos I talk about one Bible chapter each day and also give you a little more info from my Bible and my study notes. So be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and follow buttons. I would greatly appreciate it. So in today's video, we are talking about 1 Samuel chapter 25. The beginning of the chapter is sad. We see in this chapter that Samuel passes away. So we say goodbye to Samuel at the beginning of the chapter, and then we learn about some more adventures of David. So I think today's chapter is a prime example of the Old Testament not being boring. I agree. For years, I felt like the Old Testament was harder to read, harder to understand than the New Testament. But each time I go back and read from the Old Testament, I find it more fascinating. So it can be really, really interesting. Now, in today's chapter, we see David and some of his men go to a place called, it's M-A-O-N, Maon. I think that's how you pronounce it. And there was a wealthy man there. His name was Nabal, and he owned a lot of livestock. Because David and his men are in this area, they want to approach this man to see if he might give them some supplies, some food. David compiles actually a letter for his men to take to this man to remind him that when his shepherds were in David's territory, they took good care of them, they were kind to them, and they just want to kind of see if he could return that kindness. Well, David sends this message to this man, Nabal, and he quickly refuses. As a matter of fact, he kind of gets an attitude about it, and he's like, who does this David think he is? Does he really think that I'm going to help him and refers to them kind of like outlaws? Well, David is not happy when he receives this message back, and he decides he's going to gather his men and they're going to go take care of this Nabal. Luckily, some common sense and some help comes into the picture through Nabal's wife. So we see in verse 18, Nabal's wife, Abigail, she heard all of these things that were going on. And in 18 it says, Abigail wasted no time. She quickly gathered 200 loaves of bread, 2 wineskins full of wine, 5 sheep that had been slaughtered, nearly a bushel of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 fig cakes. She packed them on donkeys and said to her servants, "Go on ahead, I will follow you shortly." But she didn't tell her husband Nabal what she was doing. Well, she goes out and actually meets David and his men as they are approaching where her husband is. She basically bows down to David and apologizes. We see in verse 32, David replies to Abigail. He says, "Praise the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you to meet me today. Thank God for your good sense. Bless you for keeping me from murder and from carrying out vengeance with my own hands. For I swear by the Lord, the God of Israel, who has kept me from hurting you, that if you had not hurried out to meet me, not one of Nabal's men would still be alive tomorrow morning." Then David accepted her present and told her, "Return home in peace. I have heard what you said. We will not kill your husband." Abigail goes home. Nabal is back at home having a big party. He's drunk, and she decides to wait until the next day to approach this topic with him. When the topic is brought up, Nabal gets so mad, he has a stroke, and 10 days later, the Lord struck him and he died. So things do not end well for Nabal. Now here's the big twist at the end of today's story. Guess what happens? Nabal passes away his widow Abigail then marries David. This is like soap opera material here. So my verse or footnote that I want to share with you today comes from verses 36 through 38. It says, when Abigail returned home, she found her husband throwing a big party and celebrating like a king. Nabal had rejected God's appointed king, David, and instead he was acting as though he himself were a king. Looking at the story from our perspective, we can see that Nabal was a fool and it cost him his life. But today people make the same mistake. When we, myself included, reject God's rule over our lives, we make ourselves king and indulge our own desires without thinking about the consequences. Are you trying to be king of your life? Submit to God's authority, and then you have a real cause for celebration. So, something that kind of stepped on my toes today. Don't know if it maybe stepped on yours too. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time.